H-blocks again centre stage in northern politics. The Howth explosives find an associate of a breakaway Republican group among 4 arrested. Dermot Desmond says he never collected or solicited money for Fianna Fáil. A huge air-sea rescue operation sparked by a hoax call on a mobile phone. Good evening and welcome. It seemed like open house today for the media at the Maze prison. On the eve of the Northern Secretary's unprecedented visit, journalists were given rare access to the jail and its inmates, Loyalist and Republican. Loyalist prisoners say they welcome Mo Mowlam's visit. IRA prisoners say they're considering her offer to meet them. The H-blocks have been rarely out of the news in recent weeks. Tomorrow's throw of the dice by the Northern Secretary is yet another attempt to keep Loyalists aboard the talks process. It's thought the PUP's decision on whether or not they'll boycott Monday's resumed talks will be announced tomorrow.
The Maze governor said today's unprecedented media visit had been arranged to counter the impression of a lax regime where prisoners could readily abscond, weapons were available, and ultimately inmates could be murdered. He said he'd been devastated by the death of Billy Wright and maintained that tougher procedures had been introduced at the jail. On the Loyalist wing housing UDA and UFF inmates, prisoners agreed. But these were special circumstances.
We are parties now for prisoners.
This is a jail because we're political prisoners, right? That will be voted differently than any other jail because they're parliamentary blocks. Right? That's understandable. We're not Janauary, we're not McGilligan, we're not the ODCs, the YOC. Okay, we're political prisoners.
Here in one of the UDA blocks, prisoners are flatly refusing to talk about tomorrow's meeting with Mo Mowlam, but it's clear that they broadly welcome the opportunity. One of those who will be meeting the Secretary of State is the inmate who lives in this cell, Johnny Adair, one of the most feared figures in the UFF in Belfast. Adair is serving a sentence for directing terrorism and will be on the delegation along with another high-profile figure, Michael Stone, serving life for the Milltown Cemetery killings. He said today he sympathised with the daughter of one of his victims, who said this morning she backed Mo Mowlam's decision to talk to him and his colleagues.
You know, and I felt for that girl, you know, and I think she's very brave in what she said. You know, it must be difficult for her. The same way it's difficult for loyalists from a loyalist. It's like Kelly or whatever, the Shankill bomber. If she met him, loyalists wouldn't be too happy about it, you know, but she seems a bit bigger than politicians that have criticised this meeting tomorrow.
He said loyalists would listen, not negotiate, when they met Mo Mowlam, and there was some limited optimism that the meeting might achieve a breakthrough.
Hopefully.
Hopefully it'll clear up any misunderstanding.
Well, the door's open for all options are open. And hopefully we can come to some sort of arrangement.
It's a matter of yards to an IRA block. There's a political gulf dividing them from loyalists, but inmates there agreed too that the regime was far from relaxed.
It has been said by a number of people that the prisoners are in control of this prison. Can I say that if we were in control of this prison, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today, because I'd be out of here, I'd be away, I'd be through them gates, and unfortunately that's not the case.
The IRA prisoners are deciding tonight whether they'll meet Mo Mowlam. If they do, Padraig Wilson and Jim McVeigh will be on the delegation. Both are serving lengthy sentences for possession of explosives. Nonetheless, they maintain Republicans are serious about peace.
I have 2 young sons. I don't want them to grow up and have to face the type of choices that myself and other people had to make, or to experience the type of injustice that we had to experience. So we want to make this process work.
I believe that Republicans are committed to the peace process. The IRA has demonstrated by its own lack of action, if you like, its commitment to its ceasefire. I mean, I think that speaks volumes, and I think that Republican spokespersons almost on a daily basis have been signalling their commitment to this process.
As today's media visit ended, the prison governor gave his full backing to tomorrow's meeting.
I think it's a very brave decision. The Secretary of State is determined to do all she can to pursue the peace process, and I think this could well be a step towards that.
So, once again tonight, prisoners in the North's jails may themselves hold a key to political progress outside. David Devonpower, RTE News, in the Maze prison.
The Northern Secretary's visit to the Maze has been condemned by the Alliance Party, the DUP and some members of the Ulster Unionist Party. The Loyalist parties and Sinn Féin have welcomed the idea.
The Secretary of State's unprecedented move to meet Loyalist and Republican prisoners at the Maze has been described by some as courageous, by others as madness. Mo Mowlam was in the Maze before when in opposition, yet the sight of a British government minister talking to paramilitaries has infuriated many. The Ulster Unionist MP Willie Ross claimed the Secretary of State had crossed a line in the sand which will have serious consequences for democracy and peace. The deputy leader of the Alliance Party was furious.
For fear of violence and a return to violence, they can get a Secretary of State jumping through hoops, going into a prison to talk to murderers. I think it is disgusting, I think it's appalling, and all right-minded people will see this as a subversion to democracy.
Sinn Féin and the Loyalist parties have welcomed the visit. So too has Brendan Bradley. 5 members of his family have been killed in the Troubles. His sister was shot by Loyalists, his brother by Republicans. He supports the visit.
It's no use talking to people who aren't fighting. You have to talk to the people who are fighting to get them to stop.
Paddy Brady was murdered by Michael Stone 14 years ago. Yet his daughter Frances believes the Secretary of State should talk to her father's murderer.
I certainly have stopped hating the man because it saps too much my mental energy, and I have better things to do with my life than to think about that man, because I certainly know he's not rotting in a prison cell. He is quite merry that he is conducting his affairs. He is able to come home to visit his dying relatives, which is a lot more than what my sister and I and my mum were ever allowed to do. I certainly agree with going in and talking to the paramilitaries, but as far as this whole business of considering early release, no, I don't agree with it.
This morning the RUC arrested 4 men on the Loyalist Shankill Road for what it described as serious crimes in North Belfast. It's understood they are being questioned about the gun attack on the Clifton Tavern on New Year's Eve. 1 Catholic man died, 5 others were injured. Although the killing was claimed by the LVF, security sources still believe the UFF, which is supposed to be on ceasefire, played a major part in the attack. Michael O'Kane, RTE News, Belfast.
And our Northern editor, David Davenport, joins me now. David, firstly, do you expect the IRA prisoners to meet the Northern Secretary tomorrow?
Well, Anne, as soon as they learnt that Mo Mowlam was going into the jail to meet Loyalists, Sinn Féin immediately demanded that the Secretary of State meet Republican prisoners as well. Now, they may not have expected quite such a swift response, but I think it will be difficult for them to turn down her invitation, so I anticipate there will be a meeting, yes.
And returning now to those extraordinary pictures from the Maze, what were the ground rules for your visit there today?
Well, all concerned today had a common interest, that is the authorities, Loyalist and Republican prisoners. They wanted to scotch stories that the prison was some kind of long-term holiday camp where sex at conjugal visits, drink, drugs, mobile phones were permitted within the system, and that the prisoners effectively controlled the entire jail. Now, to do that, they had to give us access, and the access they gave us was unprecedented. Once we were inside the wings, we were free to film anywhere. There were certain modest ground rules. We weren't encouraged to film personal belongings, personal photographs. Some prisoners didn't want their faces photographed. But nonetheless, there was widespread cooperation with the media, and effectively we could do what we liked. The prison governor and an assistant governor accompanied us, but for most of the period we were there, they were in the recreation area and we were shown around by the prisoners themselves. Now, some prisoners were less comfortable with this arrangement than others. For instance, Johnny Adair, whom you saw on the report earlier, seemed a little unhappy to have people filming in his cell and taking photographs of him as he walked around the jail, but he complied with the arrangements nonetheless.
Well, we saw familiar faces there, Michael Stone, Johnny Adair. How great is their influence on their fellow prisoners?
I think their influence outside the prison is considerable. I think they're icons within Loyalism. I think that to some extent they cannot be ignored. But as Michael Stone observed today, prisoners within Loyalism are just part of one larger picture, and while they have an important voice within the Loyalist structure as a whole, it's a voice that will be listened to rather than necessarily always heeded. But nonetheless, the influence particularly outside the prison, of iconic